Hey, welcome back to the Next.js 14 series. In the previous video, we learned about creating API routes and how they allow us to easily handle both retrieving and sending data within the same Next.js app. Now that you've got a solid understanding of that, in this video, we're going to take it up a notch by using those same API routes to create and retrieve data through our pages. But in the last video, if you remember it correctly, we made an endpoint to retrieve and create users, right? So we can just use our native endpoint to do the demonstration. Let's just make a general page route as users. So we're gonna make a page.tsx inside the users folder. Instead of making a separate component, let's actually mark the whole page as a client component. Let's mark it as use client. And first of all, we're gonna write export default function page. Inside it, let's first return a div with class name of p5. Let's return a heading with users. Now we're going to create an empty element ul. Here we'll be mapping all our users. So before returning, we're actually going to use the use query hook. We're going to write constant empty object equals to use query. We're going to have an object, and inside it we're going to write query key as users array. And then we can have our query function as async. So inside this async function, we're going to have constant trace equals to await fetch. We can just write /API/users. On the next line, we're going to convert it into JSON. So I can write constant data equals to await res.json. And lastly, we're going to return the data.data. Now, inside this empty object of constant, we can actually destructure the data and is pending. Now we can rename the data as users. After this query hook, we can just write if is pending, just return loading. And lastly, inside the return, we can actually map the users with users.map. Then we have the callback as user, and inside the li, we're going to assign the key with user.id. And lastly, we're going to map the user.username. Now we can actually visit the page, but it will not show any user in the list because we need to create them. So let's go make a folder inside the users folder as create. Now the route as /users/create. Inside it, we're going to make a page.tsx. First of all, we're going to make it a client component with use client. And next, we're going to default export the page. So export default function page. Now inside this page, what we can do is return a div. Inside it, we're going to have a heading of create user. Next, we can have a form. Inside this form, we're going to have a div with the label and input. And inside it, for the label, we're going to have a HTML4 with username and the label as username. Next, for the input, we're going to have the type as text, class name as text background, and lastly the ID as username. Last up, we're going to have a submit button with the type submit. Now that our form is ready, we need to use the use mutation hook. So let's actually do it. But before doing it, we're actually going to make a ref to the form element. So we're going to write constant ref equals to use ref of element ref imported from React, and then we're going to pass form as the generic. Inside it, we're going to write null and then exclamation. And now it's time to create the hook. So you can just write constant empty object equals to use mutation. Similar to use query, use mutation also takes an object. So directly we're going to write mutation fn. This will be the mutation function that will trigger what happens during the mutation. So inside it, we're going to write async with the params. Now inside this params, we're actually going to write the username as an object, and we're going to define the type for it with username as string. Now using the function, inside it, we're going to write constant trace equals to await fetch. So again, we're going to send a request to the same endpoint /API/users. But this time we'll be using the method post. We're going to give it the headers of content type application/JSON, and lastly we're going to give it the body with JSON.stringify with username the whole object. Then we're going to convert it to JSON with constant data equals to await res.json, and lastly return data.data. So after the mutation function, we're going to write on success. So if the mutation function executes successfully, React query will automatically move to on success block. So you're actually supposed to write a toast over here, but we're just going to write alert user created. Now for any reason, if the mutation fails, it will go to the next block with on error. The on error takes the error as the parameter, and now we can actually write alert error creating user with the error.message. Now lastly, we need to reset the form. So you can actually trigger an event with on settled. So it doesn't matter whether it succeeds or fails, on settled will always be triggered. So inside it, we're going to write ref.current.reset. Now inside the empty object, we're going to destructure, mutate, and is pending. Now after destructuring, we're actually going to rename the mutate function as create user. Now first of all, we're going to assign the ref to the form element. So ref equals to ref. Then for the on submit, we're going to handle the e or the event with e.preventDefault, and then we're going to write constant username equals to e.currentTarget.username.value. And then we're going to trigger the mutation function with create user of username. Now inside the input element, we're actually going to use the prop disabled, and I'm going to assign it to a pending. we're going to do the same for the button with disabled equals trace pending. Let's actually see it in action. So after heading over to the /create page where the form read. Now what we can do is give the user a username and let's actually submit it. See, we got our alert. Now if we head over to /users page from another tab, well, we have our first user listed over here. Let's make another one just for testing and try it out. Look, it's working too. And that wraps it up for today. We covered how to use React Query's use mutation along with use query hook with Next.js route handlers to perform data mutations directly from our client. In the next video, we'll shift gears a bit and focus on styling our app using Shadcn UI and Tailwind CSS. So don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and drop any questions or suggestions in the comments below. But before I finish up, I want to let you in on something exciting. If you're enjoying the content and want to support me, you can join my Patreon at patreon.com/itstrvgo. As a subscriber, you'll get early access to all my videos a day or two before they go public on YouTube. Plus, you'll be able to see exclusive behind the scenes, get sneak peeks of upcoming projects, and much more. It's a great way to stay ahead of the curve and get involved in shaping future content. Also, if you have any questions or need help with anything we covered, don't hesitate to join our Discord server. I'm active there and it's the best place to connect with me and the community. You'll find the link in the description below. Thanks for watching and I will see you in the next